Okay, hello, good morning. Um, it's been a while since I've done one of these things, but I've missed doing it, and so I had a little time this morning and had some ideas to work out. I would love any feedback, comments, live comments that people have, whatever. um, so I'll start out with this. So my friend Cal, Clea, he messaged me the other day. What did he ask? I should just look it up. He asked if my creative medium is theology, philosophy. I think that's what he was asking, essentially. And I said, yeah, I do think it is. Yeah, my artistic medium. um, I think so. And then I was talking to my wife about this because, uh, what's up, McMill? Good to hear you. Good to see you. Which also, by the way, your conversation with who do you talk to? You talked to Neil, right? On Chad's channel was fascinating. I didn't. You said things in there like what's so great about this corner is like we would probably have theological issues, but the way your mind works in general is fantastic. So I think it's great, but I don't know. Well, and who knows? So I was talking to my wife. Circle back to that about potentially starting a podcast, which I don't know. I struggle with because my problem with doing a lot of things is that I am I don't know. I guess because however you want to frame it, I don't like doing things that uh seem lame or that seem status quo. And it's not because I'm like a, an unironic or an ironic hipster that like goes thrifting because it's secretly this new hip thing. You know, like anything, it's Christ and Antichrist. Uh, anything can become your new marketing or your new avatar or your whatever. And so, like, being a hipster, being anti corporate or status quo can become the new status quo. Like we did a old G Randos conversation. Chad's been suggesting people check out the OG Randos United channel. Um, and I should probably just go back and listen to a bunch of those. However, I don't know. Sometimes I don't. I'm in a huge number of them. I can't even remember because I made a playlist, I think, at one time. So I went through them all of all the ones that I was in, which is on my YouTube channel, a playlist of all my Randos United channels. And I don't know, I was in the majority of them, probably over half of them or something. And I don't, um, anyhow, we made a video that called Not Woke, Not Anti Woke, I think. It was Sam Tiedemann, myself, maybe Jeff. Can't remember. I can't remember who else was in there. Um, and that's kind of my vibe. I want to be. Before it was cool, man. The non-duality that includes duality. I'm all about it. So I'm a pretty. I like being an anarchist. I'm pretty punk. Um, and yeah, dude, the Sunday school of our dreams. Like it's a anyhow. Yeah. So Mills said the Sunday school of our dreams. I'm pretty yeah, dude, and this is what I was saying, the POS. Yeah, if you affirm total depravity, but it depends, I don't know. I've talked a lot about this. I don't know if you've never seen my conversation on POS theology, which created quite a stir, quite a buzz in the little corner back in the day. Pissed a lot of people off. Um, or or there's a channel, it's an old Randos United conversation too, that's just like I think Jeff entitled it because he was making the thumbnails and titling them back in the day. He said, what are- what art man that thou art mindful of him?" Something like that. I think that was the conversation, or that was the title of the video. But essentially, I was trying to ask the question. It was an ontological question of like, what is man? Um, where does his being exist? And it's really connected to my video that I made the other day on what is the church. Anyhow, yeah, POS theology can be a struggle. Back to podcasting, the idea. So being punk, being an anarchist, not being a corporatist, not liking to play the game of marketing mammon. I don't want to. I want to put zero effort into appealing to people that I don't naturally appeal to. But simultaneously, I want to be liked. If I'm trying to be, it's kind of like the idea of I've always said, like, why would you not present yourself as vulnerably? Wow, this is like Paul trying to say, what did he try to say the other day? The word that he could never say. It was hilarious. Sometimes it's hard to say words. Uh, but you want to be as vulnerable as you possibly can, as authentic as you possibly can, meaning uh, true to yourself, because also you can try to be authentic and be inauthentic, because you're lying to yourself, you're faking to yourself, because that's the whole Jordan Peterson brothers Karamazov thing, like, above all else do not lie, especially to yourself. That's in Brothers K. But then Peterson says, because in so doing you pollute your very organ of perception, of being able to discern truth and lies. um, what up, Chad? And that's very true. So you can't discern if you're even being authentic if you lie to yourself. I mean, you're just being a liar. So all of that in starting a podcast, like, starting podcasts has become popular. However, I believe that I made that one live stream, Gutenberg 2.0. I think we are in a moment. I think there's a high likelihood that we are in a moment of major cultural shift, technological shift. People talk about this with like the internet, cell phones, mass media, and I think a lot of it is because of the McLuhan. The medium is the message. That um, the medium, we have been a written centric. A lot of our thinking and our consciousness has related to the written word, since really the year of our Lord on. So like in the what do people call it now? Like current age. What do they try to do it? Making it like trying to not be explicitly a reference to Jesus, like the current era or whatever. Um, it's written centric. We started having scrolls and canon, even the Bible, 300. They canonized the Bible, and then you had the Bible. In the old days, you had the Torah. They had scrolls, but then you had books, and then it made making books that much easier. You could make them that much more ubiquitous, and then literacy increased, and the technology of the book is where we've been in for centuries. Now we are in the technology of the internet. We're in kind of a spiral dynamics way. Our technology has brought us back out of, and Pete mentioned this strange theology in his conversation with Chad the other day, which my referencing this of despirited breath. I've called the written word despirited breath, where you remove the spirit from the words. And that's where you thought you could have this definitional, static, objective, rational, logical, positive, whatever understanding of words, which doesn't understand that words are not a one to one correspondence with meaning. Meaning is polysemous. There's meaning is fecund. Meaning is personal. The person is the locus and the nexus of all meaning. Because in order for there to be meaning, it has to be not even filtered through me, perceived, comprehended, apprehended by me. I am the meaning maker. You are the meaning maker. Everyone is the meaning maker. And so everyone's understanding is fundamentally centered in them. And like you could say, so like there's this comment here by New Gloff. What's up? Authenticity is narcissism and self-referentiality. I would argue it's not. Uh, It's not at all. I think when you think of authentic, when you are within a Western post-Cartesian mind-body dualism, objective subjective divided world, versus the one story universe that I think that we live in, where everything is interconnected to everything else. Spirit and matter, like we don't know where one begins and one ends. God, it's hard to tell where one starts and one ends. The God man relationship, the Chalcedon arguments. Um, this even gets into like my panentheism versus pantheism. Rogan's been talking a lot about lately about how he thinks creation, the cosmos, the universe is God. And there are degrees of that that are right, because even in Kabbalah or in Christian mysticism, Christian theology, the lines between pantheism and panentheism are hard to differentiate. And I think most modern uh, philosophers, theologians, lay people haven't really thought about it. But they have this hard divide between spiritual and material, and that's why we come up with words like supernatural. Although I understand in natural theology there's a lot more it's more complicated than that. But like authenticity, yeah, I'm much more with McMo. Authenticity is the only way out. I would say if you don't, I was talking to Chad with this with this a little bit the other day. I have a very I am very attuned or keyed in, or yeah, attuned is the right word probably. Like my radio frequency is very zoned in on whether or not somebody is being authentic. I would say authentic. And what that means, because it really really matters to me. Because authenticity to me is the way I would frame authenticity is it's not lying to yourself. That's authenticity. If you are not lying to yourself, you are being authentic. So this is why, like I've pushed Paul on this. Even the idea of the secret sacred self is a false framing, I would say, because you're within the subjective objective world. You think you can divorce those two things, and you can't. You don't understand what the person is. Um, Good morning, Mandy. So, what's up, Dolly? So this is a good question. I'll come back to this in a while. This Bob. Um, what is it that happens in theosis? God doesn't make me more myself than I could ever be. No, I think he does. That you are becoming more yourself. You could say you are remembering more of who you are. Remember, embody, because memory is that thing that exists outside of time and space, but is becoming in space and time. Like Sherry has said, is our becoming is God's becoming. And this is like the hard lines between process theism and kind of divine simplicity or classical theism. Is like if there is becoming, if God is just one, divine simple, and there are no parts to God, he's just one thing, well then it's in a sense you're a monad. How can there be, and I mean you can say there's like a relational, mystical, outside of eternity, like non-becoming simplicity to God that's relational, but it's I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to even talk about or wrap my head around that. Like there's a line in the liturgy that's one of those lines that's just like a sticking point for me that I don't really understand. I was speaking to a buddy at church about this, my deacon friend, who was saying he thinks that's kind of a Hellenistic Greek kind of holdover in the liturgy. It's a more Hellenistic thing, but like the pre-eternal God. What is pre-eternal? Like it's kind of a Cohen-y kind of thing, which I don't. I have no the dualism that's within. It's a very non-dual thing to say pre-eternal. I don't even know what that means. It's a very weird thing to say. So what I think happens in theosis is that this is very much like my church. The church is the thing that is called out of non-being into being. That's also a line from the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. So, like in Genesis, God speaks and calls things out of non-being. Let there be light. Let there be waters. Let there be separations of the waters. This is the process of creation. He's calling things into being out of non-being. I think I need to I need to dive into origin at some point, but I think this is my whole channel, the Whitestone name, also the person. I think that there exists in in a in the eternal you, the perfected you, the Whitestone name you, the name that God gives you, the name and the frame that God gives you in the end, which is also the beginning, because Alpha and Omega, the begin and the end, are kind of the same for God and for us, for creation. It's all kind of one thing. We return to the garden that's also not the garden, the New Jerusalem. Um, that perfected you is now becoming in time, in materiality, is becoming what you always already were. So I think theosis is becoming who you are, which is Christ in me, which is particular to me. Christ in me can't be something else other than me, because the me part of it is essential. The Christ part of it is also essential, same as the church, but like that's just being, right? Because if the church is what's called, or creation, you could say that too, is the called out, the elected thing, out of non being, out of the nothing into something, then what is passing away is the false self, the flesh, the imperishable. The imperishable will pass away until all that's left is what cannot be shaken, the imperishable, the real, the ultimately real. Uh, Christ, the only existent one, but Christ has many members, and Christ has a wife. So, let's see, chat. So I'm gonna look at some comments here. So anyhow, and then I'll make a few more comments and open this up. So Mandy says, let's see. Chad says, Mandy says, I think giving up searching for my own self-naming identity and submitting instead of worship of Christ is where true freedom is found. He alone can make me into myself. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree with a lot of that. But again, there is no the Christ in me is me. You can't, like, again, it's hard, you can't divorce yourself from that. So like searching for my own self-naming identity. I agree that there is no self-naming if you're talking about the perishing false self that's that's fading away, that we're called to put off and to put on Christ. But the thing that you're called to put on to what? Clothe yourself in what? Who is the self that is being clothed in Christ? What is that? That's kind of what I was trying to get at in that randos conversation, that's really metaphysical and about ontology, is like, what are you? And this is kind of my big problem with, like, and I was talking to a local buddy about this who goes to a Calvinist church and is more evangelical and Baptist. He like is within that camp, and he can get really saddened sometimes, and I can too, about just how, which is probably my live stream tomorrow, about how much sometimes people in this little corner can dunk on evangelicalism and Calvinism and reform camps. But part of it is like, I've spoken about this before. It's like, tell me the God you don't believe in. I probably don't believe in him either. Great Rob Bell quote, which I hear lots of people bring up and talk about. I don't know if that's original to him, but it's the first place I heard it. But in the same way, you could say, tell me about the Calvinism you don't, or the evangelicalism that you don't believe in. I maybe don't believe in that either. There's so much more commonality between all of us if you, because if human beings and what they think, let's go into iconic thinking, are icons, portals, uh, the many to many correspondence. If what someone thinks has a iconicity to it, it has a being to it, it's something that's real, then it is it's a seed, or it's a it has potential to grow into something to become. It's not a static, dead, objective thing. And so then you can then listen to someone. This is what a good faith conversation is. And agape, love what they are saying into being. You can steel man it. You can, that Tim Keller Gospel Coalition conversation where, like, when you're talking to someone, you can steel man or try to understand and ask questions about what they are saying to such in such a way that you say what they are thinking or trying to express, and not only do they agree with it, but they're like, "That's better than I could even say it." That's how to have a good conversation, not to try to win in a zero-sum way and, like, prove that you are right and insist on your own way and convert other people to what you already think. Like, how boring and dumb and, see, that's solipsism. That's, like, the insularity. That's the, like, fake authenticity that really people in trying to be objective. I was saying this to Cal the other day. Actually, that's the solipsism. That's the trap in your trying to be objective to something outside of yourself, because that's a world that doesn't exist. That's just a fake world. All right, looking at more comments. Uh, yeah, totally agree with this, McMo. Everything that is was before. I am, was, and is to come. Yeah. Um. Okay, Mandy. My identity can't be grabbed by me like other good things, or it will be twisted. It flows out of worship, love of Christ. Well, it can't be grabbed in an encapsulated, objective, controlled, able to be used and manipulated way, because that's mammon. And it ceases to be, that's like you cannot worship God and mammon. The worship of God is something that is relational. It has a flow to it, which allows for the many to many correspondence. The one to one correspondence is a mammon thing, I think. Well, that's so interesting, Dolly. Every word you said is like reading your mind. I think we have. Well, then we can have solidarity in having crazy, chaotic minds. But like, even when I say that, I don't feel like, even to my wife or to a lot of people, it's like my mind is all over the place and it's bordering on manic, but it feels very sane to me. It's kind of like there's that line from Sturgill Simpson from his, I mean, this is about doing psychedelics, but from his album, Metamodern Sounds in Country Music, but Turtles All the Way Down. And he's talking about DMT, and he says, some say it might make you crazy, but then again, it might make you go sane. What I think he's talking about is, like, you can get in this hyper left-brained, ordered world. I made a comment on this the other day because I feel like Malcolm and Simone Collins are very much this way. There are people that are just highly ordered and conservative in their thinking, which is fine. We need conservative and liberal people. We need ordered people because they do things in the world. But I don't understand people there's a certain kind of conservative temperament that fears the fringe, fears chaos. Think of it in very Jonathan Haidt ways, right? I've talked about this before. Like, it's the Chimera, the hillbillies, how Peugeot talked about it. Jonathan Haidt says, though, that the conservative impulse is to have a disgust reaction to what's outside. So, like, and how that applies in identitarianism is like you have a group of people that have a bounded set, confessional set of where they identify as the in and the out. So, like, pick your poison. I mean, Democrat, Republican is like the obvious one. Are you a Republican? Then you're in. Or are you Democrat? You're in. And if you're not, you're out. And if you're out, I'm disgusted by you. I'm angered by you. That's like, it makes me think of like that TikTok thing, which I've never really looked into, but like libtards of TikTok or whatever it is, where it's just like the woke people just losing their mind and freaking out. You have that with conservatives too, though. Like conservatives that freak out about super liberal things and lose their mind. But that's both of those things are conservative, though. This is the thing behind the thing behind the thing. Is like the label was superficial. How you act in the world is the deeper thing, the true belief, regardless of what you think about the belief. And so, if you have a disgust reaction to the chimera, to the unnamed, to the chaos, to the weird thing that's outside, you're a conservative. And being conservative isn't good or bad. Like, being a conservative is good if you're conserving the right spirits. But how do you know that you're conserving the right spirits? Well, you test the spirits. Well, how do you test the spirits? How do you have discernment? It's all a personal thing. There's no law. It's love is the thing against which there is no law. And so, like, you can't make a law about how to properly discern the right testaments, because it's the identity of identity and non-identity. Then in your law, the anti-law will manifest, and whatever you think you're doing, you'll be doing the opposite of it. Which is why you can't be what I'm not woke and I'm not anti-woke, because otherwise you're playing the either or binary game of what I call the exclusivist religion of the right side of history. So, um, anyhow, Simone and Malcolm, I don't understand why people fear heresy from the outsider, from the chaotic, from the fringe, from the dissenter, from the norm. But you don't understand that you can be you that's only if you think of heresy in a written word, objectivist, either or bounded set way regarding propositions. But if heresy is a way of being in the world, a very Jordan Peterson, it's how you act. Are you divisive? Are you schismatic in your action? And like, I know the propositionalist confessionalists will say, like, well, if you don't assert the right propositions, you're schismatic. I don't think that's true. Can you disagree? Can you affirm other propositions and have different ideas while not being schismatic? That's what this little corner is. That's what this is. And like PD and Chad brought it up in that conversation, but Paul, I think this is true. Paul said this that I think he said he thinks the telos of YouTube is this little corner. I don't know. That might be right. And I think that's if so, awesome. And this gets back to my idea of the podcast, which is like basically the person. I think the future is personal. I think the medium as the message and the technology of writing made us forget. We had despirited breath. Socrates is right. The lament of the written word. Writing will make us forget. I think it did make us forget. And we have despirited breath, and that led to division. And I think what's going to happen through this new technology of long form conversations, podcasts, dialogos, having conversation outside of bounded set confessionalism is going to make us remember who we really are. Lion King. Simba, remember who you are. Because is Simba his father? Where are those lines? Like, the seed. Is Mufasa present in Simba? How does this work? All right. I agree with Mandy's take here. I don't know what was Mandy's take. My identity can't be grabbed. Yeah, it can't be grabbed. It can't be controlled. It can't be manipulated. It's a Your identity, like anything else, is relational. So, I mean, I could also talk about. Um, all right, I'm probably never going to catch up to all these comments. But this is very related to the sincerity, authenticity, profilicity stuff, which is related to Silver Door. Nathan Woods, my boy, wrote this article that he shared with me. He sent me an email the other day, but I put it in the show notes or the episode notes. So I forget this girl's name. She's a like Canadian Indian Sikhi uh, person who's like the world's biggest selling poet right now. Um, Love Sturgill. And anyhow, but he used her as an illustration to talk about these different things, which Paul talks a lot about profilicity. Confession here. I have paid no attention to profilicity. Paul would say it. I didn't know what he meant by it. That was just like one of those little corner jargon words that I was just like, I don't know what that means, but I don't care. And so I paid no attention to it. Now, my understanding of what all these words mean from Nathan's article is that so I'm going to say this and then I'll open it up, okay? And then I will, and then I'm just going to read some comments until people show up. So, sincerity, authenticity, profilicity. Let's work back into those things. Sincerity, this is kind of an epiphany I had while I was thinking through this. You guys can tell me if you think I'm right. I'm going to look at, did I write it down? Here's my notes. These are the kinds of notes that I write. I write notes. I have graphs. Did I write this or did my kids write this? My wife saw this the other day and she freaked her out. She's just like, "Life is great. Please stay alive." I mean, it's a good message, but it also that's like something that would be written by somebody who is not in a good place. Look at, and this is my kind of idea for my podcast, which I'm thinking about calling. Can you guys see that? I'm thinking about calling the person. And then as I was explaining it to my wife, she's like, "You could just call it like the self-absorbed narcissist," which also my mother, God bless her, has told me before she thinks I have narcissistic personality disorder. uh, I don't think that I do, but but the way that I'm wired, I do filter everything through myself and the way that I think about it, and my personality is very much that way. Um, Enneagram 4, I suppose, an extroverted, enthusiastic Enneagram 4. Uh, I also mentioned my mother. I so I sent my parents for those of you that remember the live stream that I did where we just ended up talking about my dads a lot. There was a couple of them, but and I it was kind of I just was telling stories about my dad, and it was kind of ended up being just a love letter to my dad. I figured I would just send it to him because I think it's good to tell your parents and other people how much you love and appreciate them and are grateful for them before they die. You know, like why not tell them while they're alive versus at their funeral? I mean, you could do both, but why not? So I sent it to him, and she was just like, "Yeah." He just cried through the whole thing because my dad's a big softy. But somehow within that, my parents must have watched it, and I mean, they know me, but they don't know this version of me because I'm 41, and like they haven't. A lot of my evolution has just been, away from them a little bit, and we haven't lived close to each other, so we don't spend a ton of time together. Um, and so, like this kind of thing, live streaming or talking this kind of way is they're probably a little familiar with it, but not really. I mean, whatever. So somewhere in there, my mom heard me say Enneagram because I talk about being an Enneagram 4, which is actually the inspiration for my evangelical podcast. And so she sent me this podcast, which is in the show notes for the one that I've scheduled for tomorrow from these two guys. What's the name of that podcast? I mean, you know, I love you as human beings. You are made in the image of God. You are beautiful people, the two gentlemen that are on this podcast. But your podcast, I don't want I did not like it. This is the 40-year-old version of myself, 41, not the 20-year-old version of myself. The 20-year-old version of myself would be like, was hot garbage, and I hated it, and it really frustrated me. Uh, but again, right? Steel man, agape things into existence. What are they trying to get at? It's just it's a quintessential. I almost want to use it and play parts of it tomorrow if I do this podcast because it's a perfect example of a lot of what I experienced in my evangelical upbringing. Sorry, this is kind of an aside. Should I just save it for tomorrow? I'm not going into it. What was I gonna do before I was gonna open this up? Sincerity, authenticity, profilicity. All right, scrap it. I'm sorry. That's for tomorrow. If you're interested in that, come back for tomorrow because it was, man. I could come up with a lot of examples of hearing sermons and hearing podcasts of people saying things as an example of how not to have TLC conversations, not to do dialogos, not to agape the opposition's ideas into being. It was just like they were just saying stuff where I'm just like, you have no idea. It's the opposite of what Tim Keller was saying in that thing. Because they were talking about the Enneagram, and I'm like, I wouldn't own your framing of this, I wouldn't own any of that. Because basically what they did, I'll just a quick one. Here's a teaser. They would just go through the descriptions of the Enneagrams. Like an Enneagram 1 is like a perfectionist or a reformer. And they'd be like, this can be treated with scripture. And scripture says you shouldn't be like that. And I'm like, would anyone who knows anything about an Enneagram advocate the straw man of what you so like when someone is a 1 on the Enneagram and they are the perfectionist or the reformer, is that like an endorsement for being a perfectionist? No, it's just describing a certain personality type. It's not saying it's good or bad. I was just like, what are you guys talking about? Do you even know what you're talking about? Like, try understanding the thing before you critique it. Maybe? Is that a good idea? Oh my gosh, it was just like drove me nuts. I heard, well, I really want to go into that because it's a huge pet peeve of mine, but I'm going to resist. Okay, sincerity, authenticity, profilicity. So, in as much as I understood it from Nathan's article, it's not just evangelicals that do that, by the way. It's like most of the modern talking head intellectual world. Politicians do it all the time. It's like, are you trying to understand the person you're arguing with? Or are you just trying to win this competition hierarchy of a zero sum thing? Are you participating in the logos or are you participating in the anti logos? And in your talking, are you being antichrist? Uh just makes me really frustrated. But I need to not do that myself. So sincerity, authenticity, profilicity. My understanding of sincerity is um, being committed to one's role and identity as almost as a vocation. So like I almost think about this in like terms of evolution of consciousness. So like a pre-industrial, pre-axial age, maybe Charles Taylor porous self consciousness. So like an old uh, medieval times or pre-medieval times consciousness was like, you know, my grandfather was a cobbler, my father was a cobbler, I am a cobbler, cobbler. Like I'm a father, I am a brother, I am a cobbler, and like that is my identity. And so I am sincere to that vocation, to those things that frame my life. But then authenticity was this thing that evolved where authenticity is being true to yourself. So like, yes, my grandfather was a cobbler, my father was a cobbler. Am I a cobbler? I don't know. How do I feel about being a cobbler? Does that feel true to who I am? That's kind of how they frame the idea of authenticity, as being true to yourself, which again isn't the way I frame authenticity. That's a little bit of the subjective objective world. That's more of the secret sacred self idea. So I would have a little nuance on how I characterize this differently. But that happened, I think, in a post written word, post literate, post industrial age. The medium is the message. The medium of how our world changed through technology changed the way that we apprehended and perceived reality. And this thing of authenticity developed. And I would argue that that's it's a pretty Western thing. It's become global now through capitalism and technology and the way that the world is. But like even now, if you go into more Eastern cultures or like really rural cultures, or even like if I go back to family, like in South Dakota or something, they live in more of a sincerity type culture still. There's a little bit of authenticity, but not at all like I am, not at all how like younger generations are. So there are like individual and cultural components to this that affect all these things. The authenticity question isn't as big of thing for them. And there's temperamental differences that affect all this. Okay. And then my understanding of the profilicity aspect then is in the age and the medium of social media, making profiles, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all these different things, because so many people spend so much time in social media and online. And then so like your profile, your avatar, how people perceive you online is a new way that we relate to our identity. Um, I still don't have a great handle on profilicity because even though I mean I get it a little bit, but like I don't I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on X, Twitter, whatever. I used to be. I mean I've used it a little bit. I'm on YouTube, but YouTube's a little bit of a different thing. So like how it all relates to that, I don't know. I think the people who are most successful now in the modern world, and I want to use I think these things these are all connected to technology, but I think the people that are going to be most successful in this modern world are people that do all three of those things well without faking. So like I want to use Joe Rogan as an example. Sorry, and then I'll go into comments. I feel like I'm not being interactive enough. And then I'll invite people in. So like Joe Rogan is a great example of someone who does all these things well. So Joe Rogan is he's a UFC commentator, mixed martial arts expert. So that's one of his aspects of like sincerity. That's one of his roles. He's a father. He's a comedian. He's a podcaster. So like these are his jobs, but and he stays true to all those things. But he's also very true to his authenticity because like his podcast, and he very much expresses this. He's kept it very lean. He doesn't have a big team. It's him and it's young Jamie doing the podcast. I think he books his own guests. There's maybe a booking agent who gets people he doesn't have access to or doesn't know if he's interested in talking to them. He never has anyone on his podcast who he doesn't want to talk to. And he always says what he really thinks. Like that's been his brand. He's just like, I contradict myself. He's just like the free form, flowing, long form conversation is like that's his baby. He basically invented that and he stayed true to it. And even now that he's really popular, he says this all the time. I'm not changing the format. I wasn't trying to succeed and get rich. I was just doing what I wanted to do. And that ended up working and giving me success and money and attention, fame. And then he's just continuing to do it. So he's developed this kind of special profilicity which does not contradict and which is in harmony with his sincerity and his authenticity. He does all of those things well. He has a unity behind those things where none of those things contradict each other. I think there's a lot of people, this is the kind of branding, again, back to my punk, anarchism, whatever. I want to figure out how to do that for myself. I will not be able to brand. This is why Christian YouTube, I so I identify as a Christian. Religion and faith is hugely important to me. Like Cal was saying, it's maybe the most important thing to me. It's the thing I like to talk about people, which is why my podcast is The Person. And I like to talk about people. I like to talk about relationships. I like to talk about temperament and psychology. And I like to talk about philosophy and theology. Um, and and I need to figure out a way to do that and have a profile that isn't like marketing that then makes me pretend to be something that I'm not, which a lot of branding can be. You're just trying, like, if you're trying to trick the algorithm or the market or win, like if you're trying to play that game, I feel like you start to lie to yourself, which again to me is not being authentic because then you're lying to yourself. You're faking something. You move out of the realm of God, which to me is like not lying to yourself, it's authenticity, into the realm of mammon where you're trying to manipulate reality, which is a type of that's the Machiavellian psychopathy, that people have talked about. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna read comments. Uh Mandy. I think most people that enjoy Luke streams have somewhat chaotic minds. I think it's true. I mean, if you have a more structured mind, this is gonna feel nuts to you. And oh, I should put the invite out. I'll put the invite out. Or you're just like trying to. This is like in my book club. Um, we read Faulkner. What was the Faulkner book we read? Dang, I forget the name of it right now. But or it's like poetry. This came up in a poetry podcast somewhere recently, and people were saying, like, why don't you just say the thing you're trying to say? Why are you writing a poem? Just say what you're trying to say. That is like a textbook way to say that I am in the trapped subjective objective divided world and I have a left brain one to one correspondence understanding of language. Just say what you're trying to say. Well, guess what? That's not how language works. You are fundamentally misunderstanding language, logos, philosophy. I don't even know where to start with you if that's the frame you're in. We're in the same world, but our egos are in different worlds. And I think you have not fallen off the peak of Mount Stupid and learned Socratic ignorance where you can actually grow in wisdom. Yes, Abby. The label is superficial. How you act in the world is the real thing. Absolutely. Um, Back and forth reactions playing the same game. Absolutely. You're out of the frying pan into the fire. This is like people that deconstruct from a conservative fundamentalist. Again, what does fundamentalist mean? I'll probably talk about that some tomorrow. Christianity. and then they move over into a progressivist Christianity, which is just as, I would argue, many times just as fundamentalist and just as conservative, but with just different values. Um, so then Rocco says, how should one react to things that are disgusting then? Like things you can't type in YouTube. Uh, well, I don't know exactly what you mean. Like, do you mean vulgar things? Because someone having different ideas and disagreeing about a topic isn't, you having a disgust reaction to somebody having a different opinion about something isn't necessarily disgusting. And I know the lines can get fuzzy with that, but a lot of that has to do with temperamental openness and openness to ideas. Like I've had conversations with a lot of friends about how I could have intellectual conversations about a lot of topics that I don't even want to mention, and be and not feel uncomfortable in those conversations, where I think people with much more less openness, and I just mean in the big five kind of openness, openness to ideas, which is where you're temperamentally liberal, more conservative, less open people that have lower lower degrees of openness are just not, they don't have as much interest in talking about ideas, and so certain topics are going to be really uncomfortable for them. Probably, I think that's just a temperament thing, but that doesn't mean that I don't have moral qualms and moral convictions about some of those topics. I do. This is why I say, like, I'm more liberal than most of the liberals that I know, and I'm more conservative than a lot of the conservatives that I know. I don't know, because like a lot of people, I said this when I spoke with John Van Donk the other day, and it wasn't recorded. It was just like a conversation we had because we just haven't ever spoken one one to one, and we got to talking about something, and I said, yeah, this is why, like, I'm a pretty conservative person, which people who know me more would know, but just from a kind of surface level judgment of me, seeing me talk about these things, people might think like that I'm not conservative at all morally, but like those are different like talking about ideas and then where your moral values lie, those are kind of different things. Libtarbs of TikTok is like Lot streaming live from Sodom. That's hilarious. um you're kind of describing why popularly conservative men can date popularly liberal women. Both are conservative. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you can't make a law. It gets frustrating. Well, every time you do, you get the opposite, which is why love is not against the law. You can't, against such things, the spiritual things, the fruit of the spirit, there is no law. You can't make a rule that will instantiate the fruit of the spirit, which is why I'm not a confessionalist propositionalist. I just don't, because those people are trying to make standard operating procedures for the spirit, and you can't. The spirit moves where it will. Just the way it is. Chad says, could you touch in Master Emissary and how it relates to metanoia, sun, and enchantment, please? And bring in Rene Girard mimetic rivalry, please. Well, a lot of what I was saying was essentially mimetic rivalry, I think. Um, I think a lot of, I mean, I just didn't mention Rene Girard and scapegoating, but a lot of people's competition hierarchies when they're doing the either or winning stuff is just, it's that's all Rene Girard stuff, and scapegoating and mimetic rivalry is, you have a mimetic rivalry is essentially what I mean when I say the exclusivist religion of the right side of history. So that's the either or thing. Like, which side of the line are you on of this binary confessionalist thing? Are you in or are you out? And then we have mimetic rivalry over who controls the in and who controls the out, and then you scapegoat those that are out or those that disagree with you, which is that quote that I love to bring up all the time, is the last remaining acceptable form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree. That's the modern intellectual world. Previous, I think, previous consciousness, cultural things, it was around tribal identity. So it was ethnic. It was biological, like even I would argue even like Russia and Nazism. It was beginning to be ideological, but it was really cultural, ethnic. Like that's what the Nazis were. It was the homeland. You know, I think the rise of fascism, communism, modern political discourse was the beginning of the identitarian world that we live in, but it was still pretty ethnic. It was like the motherland. But like America, we don't have that. What is the American ethnic identity? America by like is this group of people outside of ethnic things that are united theoretically around ideas, right? The Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, liberty, liberalism, which is very like, I mean, again, a plug for that's a huge plug for the DC Schindler Freedom from Reality series with uh, Ken Lowry on the climbing Mount Sophia thing, and because it's a very Lockean mode. um, but again, like liberalism becomes it's that's the new urban monoculture monolith religion of the liberal West is like all there is liberalism, right? But it's an identitarian singularity that's like if you're not liberal, right, you're out and you're bad and we judge you. So like that's the either orism of liberty, which creates mimetic rivalry and scapegoating, and then like I mean that's how our American foreign policy works. Like it is that to the T. We need to spread democracy. The Vietnam War. I mean, like we got to stop communism. And like is there, and there's always I mean there's truth stuff in there. It's not like I'm not pro statist communism. But I don't know. I said this once. This will piss a lot of people off. Should I say it? I'll say it. It's my brand. It's not my brand, but I say what I think. Someone was arguing because people are you're in your moment. It's really hard to see outside of your moment. Maybe impossible completely, but people are very much like communism has created more death in the 20th century. It's the bloodiest century in history. True, but time is the revelator. Great Gillian Welch song. Liberalism may be more deadly. If I had to guess, I think it will be. It's just a different kind of deadliness. It may create wars and be more deadly with just all out world wars. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not that worried about it. There'll be wars, rumors of wars. Live your life. That's what Jesus says, and I try to do that. I'm not. I mean, I can't control it anyhow, so I'm not that worried about it. Can't control anything. Uh, you know. So let go of all that kind of egoic fear. But there nihilism, depression, drug use, alcoholism, suicidality, the isolated individualism of liberalism. How deadly is that? Pretty damn deadly. Killing a lot of people. Our consumerism of the West and capitalism and outsourcing all of our pollution and child labor and the sex trafficking that we get, that the big demand is in the West. What is the cost? What's the true cost of all these things? What's the death toll for all these things that we're just sweeping under the rug? It's a lot. It's a lot. So like all those Steven Pinkers of the world and people that are like, we live in the best time in the world. You guys are fucking crazy. That's what I think. All right. Sorry, Chad. I don't know. This could be like a whole live stream. Master emissary. I mean, a lot of this is right brain, left brain stuff too. Metanoia, sun, enchantment. I mean, enchantment to me is keeping the right brain, the master, and the left brain, the emissary, because that keeps the many to many correspondent, and the world will always be enchanted because the world then is an icon. It's pregnant. You don't ever think that you know objectively what anything is because you don't. That great Lilith quote, the fact is, no man understands anything. And that allows for repentance and enchantment because you're never stuck in like the certainty of your own, you're never stuck in a world where the left brain is the emissary and the right brain is the master. And that's what allows for metanoia and repentance because you can't ever repent from something if you don't want to see the thing that you don't currently see. That's what allows for metanoia and repentance. Um, I what just happened with the comments? They disappeared. I think people can make an idol out of lowercase orthodoxy. Yeah, I think people can make an idol out of uppercase orthodoxy too. Not if it's or Christ or church, even though I think all those things are right. But I mean, we can make idols out of anything. That's not an idol. Um, I'm gonna put the thing back in there because nobody's showing up, and so I'm gonna just keep going through the comments, and then I suppose if nobody shows up, I'll just shut her down. Um, Completely agree on the Collinses. I don't know. I mean, I left the last video treatment. I don't know. It was getting a lot of um, likes or whatever, but my comment on the last Collins's video, I just don't. It's not a. My thing with the Collinses is like you can't manufacture a religion. You just can't do it. It's like because anything that is real is it's a coincidence of opposites, and it's the Bishop Maximus conversations with Vervaeke. They're simultaneously emergent and emanating. Heaven and earth. They're both things at once. And so if you just want to do all emanation, but of course that's what a hyper left-brained person would want to do. A really smart person they would want to use techne to manufacture religion to stop. But the problem with that kind of interventionism is that they are not letting the right brain be the master that is open to seeing where you're wrong about everything, even though they like they say they want their kids to. I mean, I haven't followed them a lot, so I shouldn't judge them. But they say they want their kids to disagree with them about a lot of stuff, and maybe that's allowing for the emergence. I guess. Um, it's just I don't know. It's a weird thing. Again, I try to be open to even the stuff that I'm critical of because I don't know. So, um, Collinses are satanic. I don't know any other word for it. I don't know. Like with most things, I try to. I don't know. That's another one of my taglines. I try to reserve judgment, but my discernment and I would tend to lean toward. Sorry, my back. I would tend to lean toward. I don't. I would not advocate for what they're doing. Uh, Obviously, because I'm not doing it. But in very much sense of the cow thing and non-judgment is if I were standing in their place, what you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing. It also depends upon the kind of person you are. C.S. Lewis quote from The Magician's Nephew. If I was standing in their place, and if I was the kind of person that they are, I would be them. If I had all the constraints upon me that they have on them, I would be them. And then would I be doing differently than what they're doing? By what means? Because I would have all the same I would be them. So I would be doing what they're doing. So can I judge them? No, judgment is saying if I were standing in your place, I would do differently. And I don't know, but like, what is that? Again, back to that, what is man that thou should think of him? That Rando's conversation. I don't know what that agency would be and where it would be grounded. Nowhere, I think. Um, yeah, I think that's the girl's name, I believe. That's the poet. Yeah, Rupi Kaur, whatever. Yeah. Um, Respect. I'm assuming CW. You're just giving me respect, which I will take. Thank you. I would love your respect. Okay, we got a Dewey Bird quote. Differentiation results in disintegration if it is not balanced by total integration of life. The total integration can be affected only through religion. Yeah, CW. I think that's right. Uh, and religion in the in as much as I understand it in the Dewey Bird sense, not in the institutional sense that most people hear nowadays when people talk about religion. But yes, religio, the thing that unites anything that is, which I would call Christ. Religio, Christ, unity, love, gravity, maybe. Rupert Sheldrake. Gravity. Gravity. working against me. All right. Living for your profile. Yes, you get it. Uh, Chad, Profilicity. Is it an A? I was putting an I in there. How we build our profile, whether conscious of it or not. Yeah. So this is the thing. Profilicity, like how I present in these YouTube streams, this is, I mean, for the people that know me in real life, like some CW knows me in real life a little bit. We haven't known each other a long time. If any of my other local friends are watching this, like I don't think anyone who knows me at any degree or sphere of my stuff would watch this and say like that isn't the Luke that I know. I'm not. I suppose I take a pride in not being fake. I'm not. I try to not lie, especially to myself. Honesty to me is like, I don't know, C.S. Lewis, I think, said courage, but maybe it's the courage to be honest. But there's some quote I think about courage is the virtue with which, by which, it's not so much a virtue, but it's by which all virtues can be had, or something like that. Is that a Lewis quote? I think it's honesty. I don't think you can have any virtue without honesty, which to me is authenticity, not lying to yourself. Because otherwise, you can be right and be wrong, or be wrong and be right. Lukeism, you'll be doing something for the wrong reasons, or in a way that is, like that Dewey Bird quote, it's disintegrated from who you are. Your eye is not one. You're double-minded, St. James, unstable in all you do. Um, Panentheism chat. Yeah, see the lines between pantheism and panentheism. CW, I can coach you to appear less narcissistic if you like. I mean, maybe. Do I want to appear less narcissistic? I don't think I truly am narcissistic. I just, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I've always had a hard balance with how I present myself. I've struggled with that. Like when you read the book, um, who wrote it? I hate it when I can't remember authors' names. But like How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's the dumb guy's name. It's probably sitting over there. Um, but I have a hard time. I have a hard time living in like being strategic about how I interact with people, you know, and where are the lines with proper discernment and love to relate to people, especially when they're peers. Because like with my kids, I get it, even though I'm not that particularly great at that. Like my wife is a wizard at that. And I mean this positively. She's like brilliant. I call her like the child whisperer because she knows how to engage our children in ways that if you said it negatively is manipulative, but it's also condescendingly loving, I think, which I think is a Christ-like, God-like thing, Philippians 2, somewhat. She knows how to relate to her children in a way that gets them to do the proper behavior. And somewhat that's just like meeting people where they are, right? Which is love. But there are times when I like, this is how I often feel about it. I want to just tell you what I think. But there are probably times when I think people are incapable of hearing what I honestly think, and so then I feel like, but that's what I wanna do. So then I feel like if I zoom out and I start playing this game where I'm like, "You can't hear what," like, "You can't handle the truth," then and I stop back and I present that in some other way where you can hear it, it feels, I don't know, it just feels condescending to me. It feels like I'm not treating you like a peer. So, like, I don't know. That is a struggle for me. It always has been, and I don't know how to navigate it. I'm less idealistic about it than I used to be, but still pretty idealistic. Am I catching up to these comments? Has anybody come in? The Mosaic Self. This is when I was talking about narcissism. This is a long time ago. How far back am I in the comments? The comments are like, oh man. On the topic, the Mosaic Self, McMo says, yes. On the topic of narcissism, have you read Christopher Lash's book, Culture of Narcissism? Good book. Felt naked when he described the subject in the culture of narcissism. No, I have not read that book. Um, Anselman says, "You seem very attached to the propositions of the Enneagram cult." But again, Anselman, like if you and I sat down and had a long form conversation again, like this is the same thing about that I was saying about the guys that did that podcast. The Enneagram is it's not like all models are false, some are useful. If you use the Enneagram as a model, and if it's useful to you, use it. If it's not, don't use it, you know? To the holy, all things are holy. So, like, if you find use for the Enneagram, use it. That's cool. If you don't use it. But like, to, even the way that you frame your sentence is a frame I don't suggest. That I would say you're framing it in an objectivist way, like the Enneagram cult, like as if the Enneagram is a static thing. Again, I don't think anything is. I don't play the objectivist game, so I don't really agree with that. I have found personally a lot of value for the Enneagram. That's probably for a myriad factors, and if you don't find value in it, fine. You don't have to use it, you know? Cool. Um, Neil, you think I need to go into Jung, is it Jung or Young? I think this is very much Jung is an example for me. I would put him in the category. I've always known this too. This is like my gold, my metal detector thing. I've always known there's gold in Jung. Origin, Bob Dylan. There's a lot of things that I haven't just dove into that I know I would love and find tons of value in. And um, just for whatever reason, I've either other things have been more salient. I haven't found the time, or like for a lot of these things, like when I go into Jung or Origin, I'm gonna go in deep because I don't. I'm very it's O Town. I'm all or nothing. I'm on it all or nothing at all. O Town, check it out. I'm a very all or nothing person, so I can't just dip my toe into Jung. I just anyhow, the idea of your secret sacred self calling you into the future of your meant to be self. Yeah, I don't know. Is that a Jung thing? Probably. Let's see. What is the podcast? I'm thinking about calling it The Person. And it's a very Luke thing. It's gonna be about me and not about me. Both. Coincidence of opposites. Simultaneous reciprocity. Do I know the origins of the Enneagram? No. The podcast that my mother sent me was supposed to go into that. I don't care. Like I don't care. Uh I mean, it's not that I like again, like that question is framed in an I it feels like is framed in an objectivist way. Like I don't care about the origins of the Enneagram, really. To the holy, all things are holy. Christ plays an antichrist. So like if someone were to argue like it came out of it's even like the people that are really against syncretism and they're like, like Christmas trees. Is that really Christian? Or like, what are the origins of Halloween? You know where it really came from? I don't care. Like just that whole game is boring to me. It's boring. Sorry. Um Sometimes Thomas says, sometimes I want to say there's a such thing as being dogmatically against dogma. Sure you can. That's Vervaeke's adverbial versus adjectival, and Christ and Antichrist. Could you be dogmatically against dogma? Yep. Could you be could you be propositionalist and being anti-propositional? Yes. That's my not woke, not anti-woke. This is where this is something that's a little hard for me. If people have advice on this, so this little corner is a thing that's been around for a long time. I've been in it since basically the beginning. Um, I've had probably at this point hundreds of conversations, both recorded and unrecorded, with people about lots of topics. I don't know how many times people have said that I'm like this kind of comment. You can be dogmatically against dogma, or like, are you being? And which is a very like Christian. This is why Christian YouTube wouldn't work for me, or Christian apologetics. Like, it's just not going to work because I would be triggered and frustrated constantly because it would be people like, are you being propositional in your anti-propositionalism? In your saying things are outside of logic, is that a statement of logic? or reason or something. And I just be like, I don't want to do the kind of non-conversation, non-talking that you're trying to have. I don't want to have. Like, I don't want to have that conversation. So, and I think, I guess that's discernment on my part. It's just like I don't want to engage in that. Um, Absolutely this. I don't know what this is quote is from, but absolutely. It's like that Tim Keller thing from the Gospel Coalition. If anybody wants to search it out, I've put it in YouTube comments before or in the description, but it's the Gospel Coalition, Tim Keller, Matt Chandler, and Michael Horton of like White Horse Podcast, whatever. That guy, he's a reform podcaster guy. Those four talk about how to disagree. YouTube, it's on YouTube. It's fantastic. Tim Keller, How to Disagree. And it's phenomenal. I agree with it completely. I don't disagree with what he's saying. I think very few people do it. It's kind of like Christianity hasn't been tried and found wanting. It's not been tried or whatever. The same with how to disagree well. It's not, it's just never, people don't try to not disagree well. You know, you can disagree, but then there's a way to do it well. And it's a different spirit. Again, it's an adjectival versus adverbial. Just to say that you disagree, to say like I'm on this side of the line, that's an adjective. It has nothing to do with, I would say, the moral categories of your conversation. When the conversation becomes good or bad, good faith or bad faith is the adjective, how you are disagreeing, which is that comment that was before. What was it? Which I don't remember whatever it was. I missed it. I forgot it. Okay, keep going. Onward. Okay. Everyone has a dogma. There's either right or wrong dogma. I don't know. This is where I would disagree with you charitably, and I would love to have a long form conversation with you if you're ever. I'm a fundamentalist in my own way. I mean, kind of. This is where, again, I'm open to this. Peter Rollins has kind of leaned into that, where he used to think being a mystic was the way to go, and now he sees the value in being a fundamentalist. And I think he means that unironically a little bit. I think this is what Jordan Daniel Wood's whole podcast, History and Dogma, is about, where their first episode was about Blondel. Um, Dogma, I don't, Dogma should be an icon, I think. This is the difference between creeds and confessions that Nate and I were talking about the other day. And Nate said it in a way that I thought was really helpful. A creed is not a confession. A confession is like proto logical positivist, rationalist, where we are now. That's what confessionalism became. It became hyper propositional, hyper left brained, whereas a creed always has classically been understood as a symbol of the faith. It is a mystical statement that ought not to exclude based on propositional identity. That's my belief. Maybe the church wouldn't even agree with me, but guess what? That's what I think. And I'm okay with that because that's me telling the truth and not lying. And to me, not lying to myself, even if it contradicts the church, maybe, is what's important. St. Maximus did that. A lot of saints have done that. I think it's important to do that. So I stand, I can do no other, so help me God. Sorry, Anselman. Enneagram has a great description of total depravity. Interesting. Well, whatever. I don't know what you even mean by that. So, Blue Yeti is a mic of choice for young podcasters. The problem is I am not going to buy a mic that's made unethically, I would say, by slaves and polluting the environment in China or something. So that makes it hard for me. Marylander, tell me the good mics that are better for the money. Tell me an ethically made mic, not made by slaves, by a company that's polluting the environment in as much as is possible, that is either used or doesn't. I don't have to take out a mortgage on my house. Um, ooh, is a goat mic. SM57. Ooh. Who's this? When will Andrew McLuhan come on Grail Country? I don't know. I don't I rarely, because my schedule's so weird. This is like when I have opportunity sometimes, and I probably need to wrap this up. Nobody's gonna show up. But um I I would love to participate in more of the group conversations with like Nate and Sherry and even Michael. Michael has a hard time making a lot of them because I love those dudes. I used to talk to Michael a lot. I mean, I miss that guy. I used to talk to him a lot more than I just have a hard time coordinating. I've got like three teenagers, and night times they stay up. They want to stay up later than me. It's just like impossible for me to schedule those things. But I don't know an answer to your question. When will Andrew McLuhan come on Grail Country? I don't know. Uh, can one be a sincere ironist in a Rhodian? I don't even know what that means, sense or otherwise. So sorry. Tradition does help us discern the spirits. I agree. We want Luke, we want Luke to learn how to use a soundboard. That seems depressing to me, but maybe necessary. Um, Sincerity seems more interpersonal than authenticity. Yeah, but I would argue the kind of authenticity that I'm talking about is very interpersonal. All those levels would have to be because the person is the center of all that to me. So even like being even not lying or being authentic to yourself is I see what you mean. I mean, in a sense it seems like it's the least relational, but it's almost like a proper self relation. Your relationship to yourself. Because that's a relationship too, you know. Love, do unto others as you would have them do to you, the golden rule. Or people have said you can't love others if you don't love yourself. There is a there because we are also persons, we have an interrelation, I would argue. Or like Paul talks about, he talks about just psychologically with his consciousness congress, but the person is the relationship of all the different realms of your morphic fields, your physical body, your mind, your soul, maybe your all those things. The self is the nexus of all those things. And so a proper self love, we talked about self, that'll trigger people too, but we talked about that in another podcast or live stream, is I don't think authenticity is probably that. But it's not like it's independent because no man is an island from all your other relationships. So um, anonymity is a gift. Yeah, yeah, agree. Like I was talking to my son about that the other day in fame, and I was just talking about how like I have no desire to be famous. I really don't. I think it would suck. I actually, this was a young version of myself. That was such a stupid question. But when I was younger, in my 20s, early 20s ish, I um I was a big fan of the band Nickel Creek, and this was like when they were really young, one of their first tours. I still love Chris Thiele and How to Grow a Band and Punch Brothers, all the but like Nickel Creek. I saw them live a bunch. I've probably seen them live more than anybody else. And one summer when they came through Minneapolis area, they played this tent in Wisconsin, like northwest Wisconsin. I guess it's called Big Top Chautauqua. So it's this outdoor tent. It was cool. And Nickel Creek played there. It was just this little concert. Me and my buddies were all like camping out. It was awesome. And we went to this concert and we met them afterwards. We stayed long and they like came out of their tour bus and met everyone. And I remember I said to Sarah Watkins, who's awesome, big fan, still a big fan. Um, and her solo stuff's great too. She came out, and I think my first question to her was something like, "Does this suck being famous?" And she like looked at me and like was just kind of set aback and was just kind of like, I mean, I don't know. And she's like, "I'm not really that famous," because like at that time they weren't that huge. I mean, they're not like A-level celebrity famous or something, but and I was just, I don't know. In retrospect, I was like, "That's such a dick question to ask," but it's very the young version of me would, unfiltered, I would just say things. But all that to say, I don't have. I said it's like anything. It's like the fairness. When I talk to my kids about fairness, I said nobody really wants it to be fair. They want things to be fair when they want the fairness to work toward what they want. But, like, if something is unfair in your advantage, like, say, my kids, like, if all of a sudden I cut up the cake and you get a bigger slice of cake, you're not like, "This isn't fair. Like, I should have less cake." But if you get less cake, if you get a smaller piece of cake, you're like, "It's not fair." What's that tell you? You don't give a shit about fairness. You just want more. Same thing with fame. People don't really want fame. They want the things that they want from being famous and not the negative things, which is why they don't want. So, like, I want attention when I want attention. I want money when I want money. I want influence when I want influence. But when I don't want those things, I don't want those things. So, like, if I'm famous and I go out for like a date, a first date with someone, I'm married. Just hypothetically, I'm married. I'm not going on dates with anyone. But, like, if I was famous and I went out with my wife to dinner, do I want a bunch of people coming up to me and giving me attention? No, I don't. So, like, that's the negative side of fame and money and influence, and I think it would drive me crazy. So, anonymity is a gift in that sense somewhat. Everything is to be blessed is to be cursed as well, Clem's 9. Is anyone gonna come in here? What's going on? People working? Because I'm gonna leave anyhow at like when am I gonna leave? I'm gonna leave in 10 minutes, unless someone comes on, and then I'll probably just leave and let them finish or something. Anonymity is only for spies. Okay, Thomas. You must become the soundboard, embody the microphone. Ooh. We are one. I just watched a great movie this weekend with my kids and my wife, or almost my whole family. But The Men in the Boat, is that the name? It's like it's not playing at major theaters, I don't think, but it's about World War II, the pre-World War II rowing team from the University of Washington. It felt like a great old movie that like I grew up with. Fantastic movie. Highly recommend it. Let's see. You could use a Christian microphone. Dude, I wouldn't want to use a microphone unless it's Christian. That microphone better be Christian, or else I'm not going to use it. Tell you what up, boy, boy. Uh, which is why you say you believe there's a microphone. There's no microphone. Yeah, there is no spoon. Rogan is a high bar. So I'm not saying I want to be Joe Rogan. I want to embody the spirit of Rogan, which I think is authenticity. Because like Rogan does what he wants to do, and not in a selfish way, in a very loving way. You could argue that the way that because Rogan also doesn't have a scarcity mentality. He talks about that. It's the loaves and the fishes. He is not like in a competition with other comedians. He wants to promote and encourage. And how many comedians has Rogan made blow up? Podcasts, uh, other not even comedians. Like there's all these people in the wake of Rogan that he has made be hugely successful in a very authentic way. That's beautiful. I don't want to compete with anyone. This is like I want to be. This is the whole idea of the person. I want to be so authentically, honestly myself in whatever I do that I let the cards fall where they may. And if that's successful, cool. Successful, again, success. What is success? If that makes money, cool. But I also have problems with that, which I'm going to talk to a local friend about because I have problems with capitalism. So, are Paul's daily videos prolific? Profilicity. I also love Paul's Profilicity. I mean, Paul is a great example of how to do this well. I think I have to sit back, my back's hurting. This is probably why people have like ergonomic chairs or like do standing podcasts and stuff, right? You may have to sacrifice being liked. Well, if I'm here's the thing. If I'm really myself in as much as like honestly myself in as much as I can be and not lying to myself and presenting myself in a way that's real, and people don't like me, I mean, they don't like me. What's the alternative? Being fake and then they like me? Screw that. No way. There is no Marylander. Yeah, exactly. Pick and choose. You get it. I'm a man, not a brand. All right. People are to be loved, not used, even yourself. Um, so I think a lot of people are trying to do the Peterson thing, putting our modernism in dialogue with eternity on a micro scale, which is why the traditionally religious, air quote, channels can get frustrating. Yeah, that's like Christian YouTube. I don't know. I find that stuff boring. Like I can't. There's something about it. There's a. There's like a. This is what I mean. Like I have a radar. Like people talk. Whatever. This is probably not politically correct, but whatever. People. I grew up people saying gaydar, where you have like a radar picking up gay people, which is stupid. But I mean, you're picking up like little things that you're equating to being gay. But being gay is not like having like if you're a guy and like being effeminate, is that being gay? No, that's stupid. There are effeminate guys that aren't gay, and there are really macho guys that are gay. So stupid. But I get it. It's a stereotype for a reason. Um, but when it comes to like the Christian YouTube, what I think is what I would call mammonistic Christianity, you're faking something. You're using all these Christian labels, Christian identities, Christian whatever to sell shit. I have a radar for that, and it drives me crazy. And I would never appeal to Christian YouTube anyhow, because like, how do you? I would say stuff that's gonna piss everybody off all the time. Like it wouldn't, it wouldn't ever work. Um, let's see. I am a very model of prolific prolicity. Okay. So Thomas Bergen, I've been an Enneagram too, but I don't deny its occult origins. Well, like even that, like occultism, like Wikipedia occultism. What is the occult? It's a study of esoteric things. Like, is that bad? I mean, are you thinking about a cult as in like a grew up in like the South in the '80s of the Satanic Panic? Like, do you equate occultism to Satanism? Well, they're not the same thing. So, like, whatever, it has occultic origins. Again, who cares? I don't care. I mean, it's like irrelevant to me. I don't know. Is the Enneagram a propositional confessionalist religion? Absolutely not. Not in my experience of it. It's very fluid. Like even it's very relational. It's incredibly personal. That's the nature of it. And so like an Enneagram 4, for example, you can have an Enneagram 4, but then you have an Enneagram 4 with a 3 wing, or you can have one with a 5 wing. And then there's three different subtypes. Beatrice Chestnut wrote this book, which I don't have, the complete Enneagram or something, where like there's these three subtypes, and those can all look really different. There's like a stereotypical Enneagram 4, which is probably the intimate subtype. I can't remember which one it is. There's a social and there's a survivalist in type. No, social, intimate, um, yeah, and then survival, I think. And then there's the counter type, so the one within it that doesn't look like it. Enneagram's more like you almost think about it as colors. So like if an Enneagram 4 is a red, there's a myriad, like a bunch of different reds, and then there's different like textures of red almost. It's a very very nuanced, cool thing. I don't think it's at all propositional. It's not in, and it's not good or bad. Like is being an Enneagram 4 good or bad? Yes, maybe, no. Climbing Mount Stupid? No. That's like a brandy name, which I'm not into. But I don't know. Again, that's the profilicity thing. It's not my strength. Hypernominalism, New Gloff. One condition I think is hypernominalism that we see, which is frustrating and why things devolve into anti-logos and combative dialogue. I would agree with that, I think. Uh, Christ, Thomas, Christ provides the common ground for all perspectival exchange. Yes. Um, Luke gets dunked. Marylander, McMo, are you universalist open or butt stuff open? No comment. Um, but I mean that's a kind of openness, right? Um, I can't. Yeah, that's too. I mean, those are the kinds of I'm not going to talk about that on YouTube. But that's the kind of stuff that I'm I'm very open to those conversations. The morality of those conversations is different, but like I would talk about that stuff all the time. I'm not gonna talk about it on YouTube. Uh, Cain and Abel, master and emissary. Chad. I don't know. I'd have to think about that a lot. Um, is Gerard or McGilchrist less punk? Um, I don't know. I don't know a lot of. I mean, I've seen McGilchrist in enough podcasts where I have an idea of his personality and stuff, but I don't know with Rene Girard, and I don't know which would be less punk. I mean, I don't know. I love their stuff, so to me, it seems pretty punk rock. But ooh, hot take: Abel had it coming. Wow, wow, wow. That's my Owen Wilson impression. Wow, 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 wow. Um, Liberalism could be more deadly. I'm not that worried about it. Yeah, I'm not, because life or death. I mean, it's that's a weird thing as a Christian. That's why, like Manuel said, like they talk about the Christian death cult. I'm not. I am not like I wouldn't advocate or encourage or want a bunch of people to die. But I'm not worried about it. Each day has enough worries of itself. Consider the lilies. I'm not worried about world wars. It's just not something I worry about. Where I tend to worry more is just like my interpersonal relationships in my daily life and how much I don't love people well. That's where I spend a lot of time worrying. And arguably I shouldn't worry there either. So um idols are us. Idols are us. Is that like Toys R Us? Um New Glop, I would show up if you weren't at work. I understand. No problem. Joseph Smith did it. He did it. I don't know what you're talking about, but he did it. Um yeah, I agree with this too. Politics is all about gathering your friends together to defeat your enemies. Yeah. It ain't really about loving your enemies. I know that. Um, let's see. Yeah, the Collinses, I don't know. So Bob says the Collinses seem to be in a mode of not being able to perceive any enchanted world like Homath, and said, um, I don't get music. Ups is delivering me a package. Don't ring the door. You see me sitting at this table. Is that just like is it like a habit? They have to? Maybe they have to or they get fired. Put in the comments. Who did you deliver? Graham, did you deliver packages for Ups? Do you have to ring the doorbell? Um, oh man, that's a big topic. What's the difference between this non-judgment and determinism? I was actually just thinking about this morning. It does seem pretty deterministic because Rogan made some comment in there about when he was talking about. I was listening to uh, his most recent podcast. It was like the sober October thing, guests, but not in sober October, like those guys. And he was talking about he thinks the universe is God thing, and he was talking about determinism a little bit. Yeah, that's a complicated conversation. The best thing on it, I think, is Jordan Peterson talking about determinism and free will. There's a video on it, which is actually very good, and he talks about free will, but as it relates to time. So at the moment of a decision, I think there is no free will. That the action is determined. And actually, the Leibniz studies, maybe Rupert Sheldrake talked about this in his book Science Set Free. By the time you recognize or think you're making a decision, your body's already made it. It's already done. They've done studies on this, and so you are more free the further away a decision is from you. Um, but but yeah, I don't. And how that relates to non-judgment, yeah. In that sense, I'm kind of a determinist, but determinism also kind of smuggles in certain ideas of linear progression of time, and it excludes like telotic causality from the future or retro causality. It's all that's kind of the same thing. But I don't know a ton. Okay, Euclid. I don't know a ton about Rosicrucianism. I'd like to know more because it's coming up in a few things. Like I'm currently reading Little Big, which talks about Rosicrucianism. It came up somewhere else recently. I don't know a ton about it. Like that's a question for Nate. Nate knows all that stuff, or Jedediah, or people that read more books than me. And Freemasonry, I don't really know much about. We used to have a guy who was on the Bridges of Morning Discord all the time. What was his name? Who was a Mason. He was really into Freemason. Dolly, yeah. Have any of you met a real narcissist? Luke isn't one. Yeah, that's true. I have such high compassion and empathy, like on a big 5 temperament thing, like my compassion is 80th percentile. I care so much about other people and what they think and what they feel that I don't really think I can be a narcissist technically, even though I think about myself a lot. So Dale Carnegie, that's it. Wow, that's how far behind on comments I am. Yeah, how to win friends and influence people. Okay, I'm just gonna go. Should I just go to the end? Okay, I'll work back. Yeah, totally agree, William. Past, present, and future all playing consciousness. CW. I should really show up there one day during a live stream. Yeah, however, depending on the situation with like if I were here alone, maybe. And how would you know if I was here alone? And if you just showed up to my house without asking, theoretically, that's a cool thing. But depending on the situation, it might not be cool. But I mean, you could, you live in my city and you're a friend. You have the freedom and the welcome to just show up at my house. I just might say you can't come in for whatever reason or something. Ups is not at my house. Ups lives in Cyprus. So, I mean, he could be, I guess. Maybe he showed up, but I don't know how you'd know. You'd have to know insider information. You'd have to know people who know me and where I live. There's a few people in the corner that know where I live within the megaplex of Minneapolis, but yeah. Oh, okay, Graham. Now we know. You're supposed to ring the doorbell, but they never do it when they drop at my house. Huh. Agree. Don't worry. Repent and love more. Liberalism is death. Christianity is life. Yeah, I mean, I agree. We are going into the new Middle Ages, a technocratic dystopia with a smaller church. Liberalism, any ism, is death. Because it's a closed circle of the serpent. It's trapped in on itself, All right, folks. So, oh, dude. Interesting. Nice, brother. We'll probably run into each other somewhat. I drive through Mankato a lot when I'm going to visit family, or a fair amount, a couple times a year. Mankato's a cool little town. I like it, actually. And you could come up sometime for an estuary, but maybe you're too busy. Start your own estuary. Retro causality and chat management. Yeah, totally, dude. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up. We, no guess, and my throat. I can already feel my throat because I've just been talking myself for an hour and 40 minutes. Crazy is that, closely. So I'm planning on doing one of these tomorrow, I think, where I talk about my history with evangelicalism, what frustrates me about it, probably why I left. I'll get into my story a little bit. Also, what I really love about it, what I really learned from it. You rascal, you sneaky rascal.
How am I sneaky?
I was just shutting her down.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I was catching up on the. I really just get to my desk after I've taken the kids to school and all those sorts of things, and the Californians are just getting to work. Not even really. So.
Well, it's good to see you anyhow. I would love to just schedule a chat with you sometime anyhow. We haven't.
Sure. That would be good. So what do you think of the Collinses?
I was talking about that a little bit earlier.
I heard.
Did you hear that part?
Well, only a little bit. I was like, fast forwarding, waiting 10 seconds to hear what you're talking about. Fast forward a couple minutes. What's he talking about? Fast forward a couple minutes. What's he talking about?
Dude, Gavin did a AI thing on one of these live streams, which that whole thing is crazy of how they put in the timestamps and all the topics and things.
Mm-hmm.
But it did it on one of my live streams, and I was just like, holy cow. Of like the topics that I switch and change, and then the subcategories, it's kind of amazing.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I think he's dropped a couple of those in my comment section. I'm like, that's better than my description that I put in the body of the YouTube video.
Yeah, so it is good in that sense, but it also shows just like how all over the place I am, because it's just unbelievable.
Oh man, I believe it. That's funny. That's
funny. Yeah, the Collinses, I don't. So the comment I left in Paul's video yesterday, I'm probably gonna bolt in like 10 minutes too, because I don't have much voice.
No problem. Yeah,
is the thing about it to me, and this is just my thoroughly Christian side, is it's to me, it's all about Christ. It's all about Jesus. Just always has been, always will be. And it seems like to me with their kind of creating your own religion, doing like how can the person of Christ be central in a religion like that? It can't be. And I'm not saying that in like me, in like an objectivist, historical, critical way. I'm not like talking about
I know
historical
what you mean.
truth claims about Jesus. I'm talking about the person of Jesus Christ. Is from which everything flows, all of it, and they can't have that. Really, it's utilitarian Jesus.
Yeah, and humanity has tried fertility cults in the past, where your highest god is fertility, and I think that it's you can't just have an objective like fertility as your main goal, and because it'll make an idol out of fertility, which is one of the oldest human idols. And I think that while I do agree that they're like, look, we're in an unprecedented situation. And I like when I was fast forwarding, you said something like, look, liberalism might prove to be more deadly. Perhaps the way that liberalism is more deadly is infertility and sterility and intergenerational death. Not warfare, which, let's just say lack of warfare is a relatively nice thing, all things considered. But if it just leads to sterility and voluntary intergenerational suicide, then that's a different kind of deadly.
Yeah, I mean, and it's if you think about it like true cost, total cost of like any sort of like whether it's fascism, communism, liberalism, what is the total cost? I mean, infertility, yes. I mean, there's a lot of people, the kind of technocratic, globalist, progressivist, environmentalists are going to hear that and just be like, well, that's good. Because, you're having less kids, that's wonderful. Fewer kids, less kids, fewer. Yeah.
Because you're quantifying it, so you use fewer.
Yeah. But I just didn't know with like, yeah. So that's definitely a factor. No, I think that's a great point. But also, like, I mean, all the things I listed in liberalism, like, it's just we shove all the death of liberalism under the rug, and we put it where we can't see it. Like, there's tons of suffering that comes from liberalism, but people act like this is the greatest thing since the invention of the wheel. And I'm just like, you guys, come on. Like, people that are that's always been a struggle. This will probably come out tomorrow, but like in any group I've ever been in, my orientation has always been like to criticize the group I'm in and myself, not the people outside of the group.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand the kind of people that have no eyes to see their own problems and the log in their eye and in their group's eye and want to criticize everybody outside the group. I'm just like, that seems so bass backwards.
I like bass fishing. It's one of my favorite activities.
I know. Okay, you do the last word, Sam, and then I want to go. What do you have? Do
you have a question for me?
Let me think. Do you have? Oh yeah. So I thought this was a great thing that came up in Chad and Pete's conversation on Chad's channel. I don't know if you follow those,
I
but
didn't see that. No.
they brought up something that Paul said. Paul said that he thinks TLC is the telos of YouTube.
I think it's certainly a good telos of YouTube. I mean, it's funny because if you think about it, well, like, what does YouTube want out of YouTube? YouTube wants to sell ads. And we're a decently good way. If like everyone had various little corners like this, and we either were subscribing to our mothership or getting ads in the meantime, but still very engaged, and we're relatively wholesome, I think that YouTube would be perfectly happy with that, the company. And I think it's a very good way to use it. Although, who's to say that Mr. Beast isn't the telos of YouTube? You know, Mr. Beast is the biggest YouTuber. He makes those videos that are like, I gave $10,000 each to people if they could live in a shopping cart for 20 years, or you know, like various like weird contrived games with big cash prizes, and he's the largest YouTuber.
Who's the arrows of YouTube? Me.
Yeah, that's always Luke's job. The arrows.
Yeah, I don't know. It is interesting in the sense of like the kind of evolutionary cosmic Whitestone named polar bear telodic thing pulling you toward the future. If it really is this kind of Christ consciousness, which is love and relationality and love of enemies and love of everyone, then what will really win out in the long term is not the kind of gaming, working the system to make the most money, capitalistic, cutthroat, I want to win scarcity thing. That can't win in the end, because that's not love. That's just winning. The thing that's going to love is what's best for you, what's best for your family, what's best for your neighborhood, what's best for your society, what's best for your nation, what's best for the world.
Over the longest time horizon imaginable.
Yes. And maybe you, I mean, does YouTube have the capacity to optimize for that?
I think so. Maybe. I like I said, I think YouTube, the company, is relatively happy with people who use YouTube the way we do. Although, you know, small channels, like, because you and I, you know, we're uploading a bunch of things, so they have to store our videos on servers somewhere. And if not a ton of people are watching them, the server cost per viewer cost is not as good as Mr. Beast. But still,
that's the kind of stuff I come to you for, Sam. That kind of thought is something I would never think.
Well, I may or may not work for the company that owns YouTube, but actually I have very little to do with YouTube, honestly. I tell them what their internet bill is every once in a while.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in and popping in. Everyone should go see. Let me see. Plug it again. When is this happening, CW? Tomorrow? Your maiden voyage, initial release at Christian Diaspora.
And he's interviewing all of our favorite whatever Nathan is.
Yeah, and
right,
Nathan,
isn't that what CW Weeks is doing? He's interviewing
Nathan Ormond, and even Nathan, in criticizing this little corner and everything else and all the problems he's had with it. I heard him because I popped onto one of his live streams once and talked with him, and I said something, and I know it stuck in his head because he brought it up at a different time, but because I was saying something like, it's deeper than ideas, man, and he's said it about me mockingly later. So you can ask him if it's deeper than ideas, CW.
What's deeper than ideas, Luke?
Truth.
Ideas personal. Are truth.
No, nope. They play in truth, but truth is personal. I am the truth, said a guy.
Yeah.
So thanks, Sam. I'm going to end the stream.
We'll
Bye,
talk
everyone.
some other time.
Sounds good, buddy.